Hello, nice to meet you all. So I'm Delphine Auffret. I'm a member of the Safer Internet France. I'm the coordinator for France, and also I'm dedicated to the awareness line, which is called Internet sans crainte, which can be translated by Internet without fear. Today, I came to Poland to tell you a little French story. I would say more or less the same thing about the organization of the Internet French Center than the Portuguese one. So I'm going to go straight to my point, even if the timer is definitely out. But I won't bother you long. Well, I'm going to talk to you about the legislating on the use of mobile phones in schools in France. After reviewing the content of the law which was passed last year and underlying in which political context it was passed, we will try to propose a report after 1 year of implementation. Then, as a part of pragmatic approach, I will question whether this type of law is the only option for schools when it comes to facing the challenge of digital education. I divided that into 4 parts: the context of use in France among kids and teens. What kind of law I'm talking about, a very symbolic one. And I will describe some practical points and how it changed or not life in schools. And we are trying to underline a few other perspectives for schools because, as a member of the Safer Internet France and the awareness line, we're developing lots of resources to dedicated to digital education, and which is a bit contradictory with the fact that phones are now banned in French school. To begin with, a little reminder about the context of use in France, just to let you compare what's happening in your country and in ours. Between 1 to 6 years old, average kids are dealing with screens for a bit more than 4 hours a week. And when I say 1, it's really 1. There are, kindergartens facing with lots of troubles with very, very young kids exposed to screens. Between 7 to 12, it's a bit more than 6 hours a week. And which is kind of logical, between 13 and 19 years old, it's more than 15 hours a week. 97 of the 10 to 14 years olds play video games, but which is funny is that the average age player is 39. So it's kind of a common issue. 84% of the 13 to 19 years olds are on a smartphone. 24 of the 7 to 12 years olds have a mobile phone, and 64 of the 11 to 18 years old have a digital device permanently with them, which means even during the night, which makes that 35% are waking up during the night to consult it. That law banning mobile phone in schools is a very symbolic one. It was a part of Emmanuel Macron's presidential campaign manifesto. This law banning mobile phone in schools has been widely criticized, while at the same time earning a reputation for working very well, which is a kind of French paradox, very common in the same time. Since the fall of 2018, mobile phones are banned in all schools from kindergarten to primary schools to secondary schools. High schools have, more freedom with that. Jean-Michel Blanquer, who is the French Minister of Education, a very powerful minister, sees in this law a way to improve the school climate and to reinforce the attention of the pupils. It has, despite of that, from the real beginning, it received much criticism, particularly from within the Éducation nationale, within the institution. This law was, had lots of publicity. It was among the first ones made by this minister. It can be seen as a political signal sent to the conservative wing of the presidential majority and beyond. Since his arrival in the government, Jean-Michel Blanquer has multiplied the announcement saying, he will reduce the number of kids in first grade in the very poor areas. He will, kids will have assessment, which was finished before. He was also, trying to unravel the reforms the former ministers passed in college and concerning the schoolism too. And he decided also to reform the baccalaureate, which is the main thing for all French pupils at the, kind of graduation, but a nationwide examination. So he was trying to reform that. It was like, breaking big traditions. So, same time he was expressing his favor for uniforms in schools, the return of the, mandatory dictations every day, and an increase of the number of bilingual classes, and among that, and first of all, the ban of mobile phones. So for lots of people, he was giving pledges to the conservatives. As it was multiplying gestures like that. What's in the law? Adopted by the National Assembly on July 31st, 2018, this new law provides that the use of a mobile phone or other electronic terminal communication equipment by a student is prohibited in the kindergarten, elementary schools, and secondary schools during any activity related to teaching that takes place in or outside the school walls, depending on the location and specific use, with the express authorization of the rules of procedure. Exception may be accepted, especially for kids with special needs, but it's really complicated to have those exceptions, even when you need your phone because you're diabetic or because you have autism problem. You've got your parents have to write something like 25 letters. I mean, not 25, but I mean it's tricky. Note that this law prohibits not only phones but also all the devices connected to the internet, therefore including tablets, connected watches. This law appears to be, in fact, a revision of the rules of procedure and mainly provides schools masters with a legal component to build on. Teachers who once had no legal right to confiscate phones can do it now safely. Thus, confiscation and punishment could take place in a very stricter manner. Presenting the law, the minister highlights several educational issues, but also underlines an improvement in school community life. It should, first of all, it should promote and allow attention, concentration, and reflection. essential to understanding and memorize things kids are dealing with. And the prohibition reinforces the exchanges between pupils in order to build an harmonious socialization, essential to the development of the kids. It's also a good way, of fighting against incivility in schools and exposure to shocking, violent or pornographic images, which was a kind of common problem in secondary school or even high school. Practical points, I mean, how does it work? Can kids come to school with their phones even if they don't use it? Yes. Because it's not the possession of the mobile phone that is prohibited, but its use. The main thing is each school has to choose how to implement the measure. Most of them impose to turn off the phone. They want just, the thing to disappear. But the richest one installed lockers to drop them off on arrival in the morning. Are there any exceptions? We said yes, for kids with special needs. The rules of procedure are also defined for which educational uses the phone may be authorized. And it's good for us because we're trying to educate kids, about digital behavior, citizenship with internet and all those kind of issues. Also, boarding school phones are also prohibited by law unless otherwise stated in the internal regulation. Is the phone banned during school outings? Yes. During sports too? Yes. And what to do if kids must contact their parents during the day? I don't know if it's kind of common issue for you here, but in France, a school day is awfully long. It begins around 8 and it ends around 6 p.m. And during that long part of the day, some school teacher can be missing and things like that. And, all the schedules are, always moving a lot, and kids need to reach their parents to say, I'm leaving at 3 instead of 6. And it was a big problem because, parents couldn't know where their kids were. So in some schools, there are some special areas next to the, headmaster's office where kids can communicate only with their parents, which is also complicated. And what about teachers? They also are within the walls of schools. And is the phone also prohibited for them? Of course not. But they will, the minister say, they will have to make a reasonable use of their communication devices to allow students to take ownership of the measure. It was the official comment accompanying the law. What happened if a student breaks the rules? His cell phone will be confiscated at most for the day, and he could also have some other penalties, like a detention time or punishment, such an extra duty. All the teacher unions reacted in a very mixed way to that, saying that the confiscation is a double-edged weapon. On the one hand, it gives power to school staff, but it also poses the risk of inadvertent phone degradation, which could lead to a conflict with families. It was also why the rule, the law was passed, because headmasters had lots of problems when they were even touching the phone of a kid. Families were really concerned about that. School teachers, they're not really against it, but they're not happy either. which leads us to that balance. It's very contrasted. There's a very positive age. It's a law that restores order in schools. From the door of the school, the children are instructed to turn off and put away their phones. Even if, there are lots of reminders, teachers saying that, but the rule is often considered as simple and quite effective. In addition, some headmasters put a stress on the fact that there is really a better climate in the establishment, and also that law was an occasion to question the use of screens with teachers. And it was the very first time they had the opportunity to do that with the educators and with the student representatives too. So it was kind of a first step discussion. Initially, some pupils said at the beginning they were really bored during breaks, because since the day is long, we have big breaks. And, in fact, after a few months, we saw that lots of them took advantage of this time available to share more real activities with their friends. And it works only if the adults are committed not to leave kids by themselves, if they organize activities during the long break. The negative thing, it's a communication problem, in fact, because lots of people say that, that law was just, show off, in fact. Because many institutions had no plans to change the rule of procedure. 51% of headmasters do not consider amending their rules of procedure because it's not necessary, which means that they were doing the same thing by themselves before. And 17 will do, perhaps. And the opposition to the government considers this law is a kind of a communication operation because most of the institutions had already implemented this prohibition, which is true. In 2010, the Code of Education, which is a kind of intern national education law, has prescribed the phone in any teaching activity in the places provided by the rules of procedure. But however, without the means to propose a framework, they were just saying that no framework and no example of a sanction, anything. But I think it's worth noting that that law in 2010 was adopted by the minister at that time, who was advised by Jean-Michel Blanquer, who is now the minister in charge. So he has that thing in mind for a very long time, I think. So there are lots of positive things, but we've got to say that even if the atmosphere of schools are really improving, there are still some harassment, and that the main definition of cyber harassment, it continues, even when you're not at school, which makes it even more tricky than kind of, harassment in general. I think that even there are some very interesting thing with that law. It's not enough. It can be the sole perspective for school. I think lots of educator experts say that the ban on mobile phones is a drop in the ocean. In fact, since as soon as kids are out of schools, they will use all the devices as usual. I mean, they've been a bit frustrated not to use it during the day, though maybe they are going to use it more after, which is kind of a common behavior. In fact, the measure by itself cannot affect their addiction or their consultation of porn sites or the lack of understanding of what they're sharing on social media or, what fake news is. I mean, that law doesn't say anything about it. Just say, let's ban it. in fact, what people are asking in schools is really means to strengthen all the media education. And I think all of that can be seen as a lack of global coherence. I think it's not really the case, or maybe it's just symbolic of what's happening for everybody. It's not really a lack of coherence. It's people searching for solutions, like everybody else in the field of digital education, from researchers in universities to parents at home. I think that this apparent lack of coherence is just the same as the one everybody else has in that environment. On one hand, mobile phones are more or less banned in schools. On the other one, digital education is an integral part, of course, of study for many subjects. You know, in all the main subjects, you've got to have technical skills like coding, media literacy for, is part of all the main subject in school, and from early age, kids are, or learning, doing internet searching and things like that. And also, we've got to note that equipment is provided in school. You know, your personal phone is banned, but the use of digital in schools is not totally outlawed. Year after year, schools are more and more equipped with digital tablets, interactive boards, and digital tools can be also used for educational purpose. There are also huge departments, not huge, I mean big departments within the National Education Ministry entirely dedicated to digital education. These departments are even mentioned in the official document to help headmasters to implement the new law. So you can see the kind of contradiction there. But all those people, I mean, they are organizing professional fairs with all the actors in digital education. They fight against cyber harassment all year long with direct help of the minister and even help of the wife of the president, herself a former teacher, with a kind of a special interest in the subject. In fact, according to who you deal with, there are either people saying banning phones is the proper solution, or people, struggling for larger use of numerical tools in education. And someone trapped in the middle of those two antagonistic positions. There is a large majority of teachers, who are mainly suffering from a lack of training. Some of them simply don't know how to implement properly a lesson with digital. I mean, they haven't been trained for that when they began their career 15 or 20 years ago. And in fact, they don't feel comfortable at all, not comfortable enough with digital tools to use them confidently in a classroom. In that case, there is the easy answer for them is also let's ban. I think that thinking about training teachers, thinking about all the positive aspects of digital education requires a long-term decision and investment, not only communication. So we must also be aware of the limits of what school can do. And one of the big challenge for the coming month in France, within the Safer Internet France, is digital parenting. Because all the teachers and even all the parents are screaming for help. We had a survey made for the latest Safer Internet Day in France. And the results were just, crazy. There are 93% of parents who are saying that, on an everyday basis, the use of screens at home is a problem, from a minor problem to a big problem. And we heard that also when we were working with school teachers, that they're saying that they don't know how to do, but parents either. And so now we're trying to produce, as an awareness line, we're trying to go from school. We've been there for years, producing resources about media literacy, about harassment, about all the possible issue connected with civic behavior and all those kind of things. And now we're trying to go from schools to family. And that transition, it's not an easy going because it's really hard to go, into families, which is a private space. And so we're trying to produce resources in the same time for school and families, like a declination or, so that the teachers can work with kids. We're saying that at school you can have fun with your parents, with a web application or things like that, to have challenges, to have, to know how to make rules together, to use the screen for the best. And I think that everybody is trying to define together new rules for that new world, which was born with digital. And we're struggling, and I would be glad to hear what's happening in your countries. Thank you.
Thank you.